All right, so I want to show you kind of an HDR feature in Photoshop CS6, but kind of not. And here's the deal. I encourage you that even if you're not into HDR photography, you should check this feature out because it allows you to use Camera Raw in a way for merged brackets, merged photos that we've never been able to before. So even if you're not into HDR, if you're into outdoor photography, any type of photography where you have challenging highlights and shadows, then you're going to be able to use this tool. All right, so let's go up here to the File menu. We're going to go down to Automate. I'm going to go to Merged HDR Pro, and we're going to open up a bracketed series of files. So I've got 3 right here, where it's of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and all taken at different exposures. So we're going to go ahead and open these and get them into the HDR dialog. I will click OK. And Photoshop's going to go along the process of kind of merging these together. You know, like I took these photos on a tripod. There were 3 different exposures to the photos, and it gives us the ability of what we can do in HDR to kind of bring out the shadows and bring out the highlights of all the different areas inside the photos rather than doing it manually by merging all 3 manually inside of Photoshop. So the HDR dialog hasn't really changed. Normally, you'd be in this 16-bit mode where you'd see all these HDR settings here. And this might be what you're used to if you're looking at HDR photos where you can get really crazy with the detail and the highlights and the shadows and everything. But instead, this time, you're going to go to 32-bit mode. Okay? And by the way, you can still use Photoshop's auto align because it's really, really good. And you can still remove ghosts. If you had something that was moving through the frame, you could remove the ghosts from it. So if I had like a person was moving through the frame in one of these, I could remove, it would help remove that. And down here, you just pick which one you want to be your base when it comes to removing those ghosts. Removing ghosts in a church kind of sounds weird, huh? Anyway, all right. So all you got to do here is click 32-bit. You don't have to do anything else. When you're done, click OK. And what's going to happen is it's going to get taken back into Photoshop. And you know, right now it's merging 3 different raw photos together. So you've got a ton of highlight and shadow detail, a ton of tonal and exposure detail inside of these photos. So this is what we're left with, which is very underwhelming back inside of Photoshop. All we're going to do is I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to put it into this HDR folder that I had before. I'm going to save it as a TIFF file. Okay. And we'll click Save. Click OK. All right, we're good there. So, and it takes a minute to save here. But here we got the image saved, so let's close it. Now what we can do inside of Photoshop CS6, and you got to make sure you download the updates, because if you haven't downloaded an update in a while, you'll need to. Make sure you just come over here under the Help menu, and you'll see down there there's updates right down here toward the bottom there. All right, so let's go over to Open. Let's go open this file. The only thing we're going to change this time is under Format. I'm going to change it to Camera Raw, because I can't just open TIFFs in Camera Raw. I can open up JPEGs, I can open up RAW files, I can open up other types of images inside of Camera Raw. So TIFFs fall under that category. Even though it's not a RAW file, you can open it. So let's click on Open. And check this out. When I come over here under my exposure, check out what I have. I have 10 stops of exposure control to the left and to the right. All right. This is compared with 5 stops of what it used to be. But more important than that, I have a huge amount of tonal control inside of these images. Highlights. Look at what I can do with the highlights. I can basically turn the lights on, or I can turn them off if I want. All right. Same thing with shadows. I can bring out the detail in the shadows, or I can make the shadows darker just by dragging this to the right and to the left. But the whole point is I get way more control and way more leeway to work with all the different highlights and shadows and overall exposure than I would had I just opened up one exposure inside of Camera Raw. So you can't merge exposures in Camera Raw. You still have to do that using the HDR dialog box. But then you can take that image and you can open it up inside of Camera Raw, and you get all of this control. And the thing that I like the most about it is I'm able to come in here and use the tools that to me I'm most familiar with. I use Lightroom, I use Camera Raw. I love the Raw interface. I'm constantly I'm constantly pushing people toward the raw interface because to me, all the sliders over here take the place of 5 or 6 dialog boxes that I would normally do inside of Photoshop. So to me, it's just an easier place to come in here and work. Okay, so the workflow to this is you still need to use the merged HDR dialog. You need to merge those photos together into something that Camera Raw can see because it won't do the merge for you. But once you've got that merge done, you come over here into Camera Raw, and whether you're into HDR photography or not, everybody wants more leeway when it comes to editing our photos, and that's what the technique that you just saw here did. You'll notice it says Camera Raw 7.1 up here. That's the newer version of Camera Raw, depending on when you're watching this. This is mid-July when I'm recording it. So just make sure you do your Photoshop updates so you get up to that Camera Raw 7.1 update, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you can do with the HDR dialog box, regardless of the fact of whether you're into HDR or not.